I think the most revolutionary teaching in my religion is the teaching to love your enemy. I mean, it's crazy from two perspectives. One, it's Jesus is acknowledging that we're going to have enemies. Because you could see a world where he's just like, don't have enemies, right? But if you're going to do difficult work, if you're going to speak your mind, if you're going to stand up to entrenched power, you're going to get some opponents, right?
Yeah.
But then the revolutionary part is that you are called to love your opponents and your enemies just as you love yourself.
Yeah.
It's easy to say in church.
Right.
Imagine, I mean, I try and fail every day to do that in the legislature, to see my opponents as children of God, to see Donald Trump as a child of God. I'm probably going to get a primary challenge right there for saying that. But
But he is.
He is.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing for progressives and Democrats to get their head around. But it's like Dorothy Day, who was this great Catholic activist for the poor and labor organizer, she had this great quote where she said, "You really only love God as much as you love the person you love the least."
Wow.
You only truly love God as much as you love the person you love the least. In other words, the test of Christianity is not do you love Jesus, because Jesus is pretty lovable. The test is do you love Judas? I mean, and that is radical.
Yeah.
And I think that is the key to saving this whole American experiment.
Right.
Is how do you love your enemies? Loving thy neighbor is really hard sometimes. And the work I do in the legislature is my attempt to love my neighbor through the bills I pass, through the work that I do on prescription drugs, on childcare, on public schools, on justice reform. But I was losing faith on whether I was actually doing what I came here to do. And so I made that decision to go to seminary to follow Jesus' first commandment, which is to love God. Those are the two commandments he gave us, love God and love neighbor. And as a seminarian and a lawmaker, I'm starting to figure out how these two commands, how they relate to each other, how they sustain each other.
How do you define Christian nationalism? What is that to you?
Yeah. So I think there's lots of different ways you could describe it. The way I define it is a little broader. I say Christian nationalism is the worship of power, whether it's social power, economic power, political power, in the name of Christ. And I think it's relevant to describe it this way because it's something we've struggled with within the Christian church from the very beginning. So the first followers of Jesus didn't even call themselves Christians. They called themselves the Way because their crucified teacher had taught them a different way of being human, a different way of relating to other people, of understanding your relationship to neighbor and to God. And this transformed them. They became these peculiar people, is how the Bible describes it, because they didn't participate in the economy, the military, the culture. They were persecuted because they turned the world upside down. Again, that's how it's described in Acts. But 300 years after that, after the Roman Empire crucified Jesus, Emperor Constantine made Christianity the official religion of that very same empire, the same empire that crucified Jesus. It started a trend, which we've struggled with for literally, more than 1,500 years, of powerful people, emperors, billionaires, dictators, megachurch pastors, using religion to protect their own wealth and power.
Yeah.
And to me, Christian nationalism is just the latest iteration of that. It's using governmental power to dominate our neighbors instead of loving them as ourselves, which is exactly what we're called to do as Christians. That unity, that loving your enemy is not just morally good. It's not just idealistic. It is good strategic advice because when we're united, when we're together, then we make it a lot harder for those two guys to come in and dismantle these ladders of opportunity that we have.
But there's also people that they are malicious. They don't care about people that are struggling, and they only care about their peers. They care about enriching the people that are already wealthy.
Yes. I do feel like those people I have found are very loving parents and spouses and even friends.
Isn't that crazy?
And to me, that means they haven't broadened that circle of concern.
Uh-huh.
Right? I'm always, because you want to think some of these people are just two-dimensional villains. I sometimes fall victim to that thinking. But then I spend time with them. I'm like, this person is kind and funny and good-hearted and treats his wife well and treats his kids well, treats his neighbors, his immediate neighbors. So my challenge is always like, how do I try to expand that circle a little bit more to where they care just as much about a neighbor who lives in a completely different city than the one who's right next door to them in Highland Park or River Oaks or one of these nice neighborhoods, right? That to me is the challenge, is seeing everyone as your neighbor, not just the people who live right next to you.